Hello everybody, here we are for the European Perspective number 7 before Christmas. So we are going to discuss tonight with US election the results and is European defense dead already? Two subjects very important for us because we discuss about European issue. And so this time we are with Marie-Hélène Caillol, President of
Hello.
European Integration Politique and Published Director of GIB, Marianne Rancormier, President of Citizen Roost, and we have two invited guests that are Adrian Taylor, that is founder of Foresight to Strategy, Foresight to Strategy Sustainability and Security in Governance, Edouard Husson, French historian specialist of contemporary Germany, current president of Robert de Sorbon Foundation, and Pietro Beltrame, that work in information communication technology manager consultants, and that is referent for our Department of Geopolitics and Defense of Roosevelt for the Latin America. So tonight we discuss about the consequence of US election on Europe, because Biden is not yet president, but the German Minister of Defense already declared that Europe cannot ensure its own security without the help of the US and the NATO. That was soon approved by the Spanish Prime Minister. Is France, in the country, the last US state advocating for a strategically independent US? Do we have here a new line of rupture within the UE and the upcoming Brexit, or France soon to surrender to the overwhelming common vision of a Europe 51 American state, or America-Europe 29 member? So we begin our tour of table with Marie-Hélène, so I give you the start.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for the invitation and for this interesting topic. Indeed, whatever one's opinion of Trump, he was a good reason for Europe to reposition and to build, to build its independence, as for some countries is one of the aims of the European Union project. So now it's been a question. I mean, at LEAP, we were anticipating that with a Biden victory, what would be the reaction of Europe? And the first reactions were indeed quite. I'm French. As a French person, it's quite scary, in fact, to see all of a sudden the German defense minister, the German prime minister, présidente. Marianne, aide-moi, elle est présidente ou elle est... Enfin bon, the German government, of course, very happy, celebrate, of course, the election of Biden, which is normal, but very soon we heard about this declaration from the German Minister of Defense, which I quote, it's really interesting: the idea of Europe's strategic autonomy goes too far if it fosters the illusion that we can guarantee security, stability, and prosperity in Europe without NATO or without the US, which is very rational. It's very realpolitik, but it's also a signal of a complete failure of what was one of the essential, not essential, but was an important aspect and goal of the European construction, which was to build a strategic independence. So, of course, this declaration raises questions, knowing that is it representative of a stance, a German stance, and we have an election in 2020 where Merkel we're going to have a new chancellor, and so. Should we anticipate that this is the kind of line that we are going to see more? In fact, with Angela Merkel, who was quite willing to work with in the Franco-German engine. Enfin, so she did her part as a European and playing working with France in particular. So, are we going to have a Germany which will be more connected to Northern Europe, to America, and therefore, and that's where we are beginning to worry that there could be some kind of a Europe, which is a Europe. It's transnational. It talks about Germanic culture. It talks about Eastern Europe, which is the German sphere of influence. It talks about trans-European, transnational dynamics. Reconnecting with the new president to the US, and therefore strengthening the divide which is already there, the growing divide between Southern Europe and this Northern Europe. And in particular, because I'm not so sure personally that Spain, Portugal, even Italy, etc., it will be interesting to have that in our discussion, but I'm sure that in France there will be interests, very big interests, that are not going to be very happy about this giving up on the possibility of a European defense, or on the feasibility of a European, specifically European defense. Well, of course, there might be good reasons. Also, there are good reasons. Realpolitik, as I said, it might be indeed reasonable to acknowledge the fact that we are not capable of protecting ourselves. Maybe there is also a strategy there, which is to say, okay, we're back on NATO, and we are back as a strong Europe to be in pair face to the US, and therefore not a NATO Washington-centered, but a NATO which is really Brussels, Washington-centered. So that's a question we must raise. We shouldn't just be not just worry, but see maybe what is the kind of strategy that's behind. Nevertheless, we have to also, I think, wonder if what kind of foreign relations we're going to have if we go back to this NATO, which of course is critical in terms of our relations with Russia, with China, because it's the new enemy of China. There is, il y a des gens qui parlent. So are we gonna re-enter, enter strongly, decidedly a strategic defense system, which today is quite conflictual in terms of understanding the emerging multipolar world, which it doesn't see very positively. So what kind of foreign relations are we going to have if this is the trend to indeed start giving up on the European defense? But so that's all the questions we have, and so it's going to, we have, I think, very different speakers after, and hopefully very different angles on this problem.
Okay, so I think that when we don't speak, maybe we can cut off our microphone. I think some echo maybe can come from this. So we can begin with some question, Marie-Hélène, about the EU and the strategy independence from NATO. Do you want to ask some question to Adrian, for example, or?
Yeah, well, I thought you were doing the moderation. Okay, so yes, why not start with Adrian? Yeah, who lives in Germany and is also British, so it's interesting to have this.
Okay, so
strategic independence means something to you as a British, I guess, but you're also in Germany, so it's going to be interesting to have your point of view.
Yes, as Marie-Hélène wrote in an article recently about this subject on LEAP 2040, you can look at. So is the EU about to give up any project of strategic independence in favor of a NATO-centered defense system?
Thank you very much. Well, welcome from my side. Very glad to be with you, and thank you for listening and coming in. As you say, I have 1 foot inside and 1 foot outside now on the EU. But let's start with the very first point. US elections have taken place. Does that sound the death knell of a European defense project? Well, let me say, at least at the beginning, it is clear that the US elections do not mean that we are now going to revert to pre-Trump. You can forget that. It's just like with COVID. There's not going to be going back to normal. It's going to be a new normal. And there are at least 4 reasons I can listen. There are probably about 20 that I'm sure Edouard and others could mention as well, of why it's not going to happen. Number one, the election, as we saw, was absolutely 50-50, really, almost, in terms of people's opinions. And that 50% that voted Trump last time is a very strong part of that population, which is not going to accept that any American president starts turning around and saying, well, you know what, you can just tag along Europeans. You don't have to pay too much, and you can just keep on going as you were going before with very small defense budgets, and we'll protect you come what may. You can forget that. Number two, the dimension also, when Trump was elected, it became very clear that in certain circumstances, maybe an American president would not be prepared to press that tripwire and say, you know what, this country has been attacked and therefore we're going to defend. That entire fundamental principle of solidarity and in any case, America will come to our help was undermined. And because it's been undermined once, that undermining will have its consequences through time, not just now, in the future. So we can no longer just sit there and say, well, it doesn't matter. If Estonia gets attacked, the Americans will be there. We cannot guarantee that anymore. Number three, money. We're all going to run out of money soon. We're spending money like nobody's business to trying to keep COVID from at bay and the consequences at bay. There is going to be a crunch. There is going to be a reckoning, and it's going to be a reckoning in the not too distant future. And think about the American budget, the trillions of dollars of deficit. Number four, I think another dimension of this is that America no longer sees Europe as the place where the action is. That was maybe 30 years ago. But now the action is in Asia. The action is elsewhere. It is the China problem. It is the other things. So all those elements are going to mean we cannot just go back to what it was before. So then the question becomes, and I'll try and get directly to what you're saying. What do we do in Europe? Well, who is Europe? Is it indeed each member state for themselves? Is it the EU and then other bits around like Turkey, the UK, and other bits that are floating around? Who is it? And more importantly, what is it going to be for? What's this NATO about? And I think what you were pointing out with these quotes that you were saying from Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, the German defense minister, was that NATO traditionally was about territorial defense. It was about protecting the Fulda Gap from a massive Soviet invasion. What has happened is subsequent to the Cold War collapse, we have become about projecting power elsewhere. Think Afghanistan, think elsewhere. It has become, so say, a deployment elsewhere to meet what indeed America sees as a global challenge of global war on terrorism, but other things as well. The fact is that today, however, we are think of that thing I said about Trump, no longer absolutely guaranteed, we're not sure. Could we really protect ourselves against a massive invasion from anybody? Even a minor invasion from somebody. Let's be honest, in Germany today, the number of airplanes that can fly properly, unfortunately, is about half the Air Force. That is the kind of problem we are facing because of years of cuts, of years of whatever. We are simply not in a position to defend ourselves. So the question is, what do we want? Do we want a NATO that is flying around the world doing all these other things? Or do we actually say, you know what, we need to think again about our own defense? Or, and that's my posit, do we need to think about a very different type of NATO that is not just European and American? It is about a community of values that any country worldwide can join if they respect democracy and the rule of law. And it becomes the motor of a new form of EU expansion. As the EU expanded eastwards, what did we do? We tried to bring our values and make them anchored in the East. And what did we offer? We offered the single market. We offered, you can come into our market and earn money here. What can we offer globally? We can't do that. We can offer security. Okay, Australia, you join. If Australia's attacked, we're also in there and we're going to protect you. We've become a community of values, a defense community, a security community that promotes democracy globally. So I'm going in a totally different direction to you guys. It's not about building more tanks and bombs and having an independent European force. And it's not about going back to being an American, they're up there, they tell us what to do in NATO. It is about rebuilding NATO for a different purpose. And we have at the same time to handle that problem of, frankly, we are not able to defend ourselves in our own territory. That as well. Okay, that for the moment. I'm sure there's going to be more coming.
Okay, thanks you, Adriano, for your panoramic view of this kind of point. Is everybody someone who want to react, or I can continue with the second question, for example, with Edouard? Okay, so Edouard, if so, what would be the consequences on the countries that are most attached to an independent continental defense, such as France?
Okay, so that's a huge question. First, I would like to say that the attitude of Europeans towards Trump was extremely irrational, because this was the first time we had an American president telling the world, well, we don't want to be an imperial power any longer. We want to focus on our interests. The fact that the Europeans went on with this silly constant accusation of Trump being, I don't know what, a fascist or anything, just showed one thing, is that most Europeans didn't want to use the opportunity to build a really independent Europe, because this was a unique opportunity to do it. Well, I mean, I say it was very irrational on one side. On the other side, it's very rational if you take Germany. Germany doesn't want to have an independent, the German government to have an independent Europe, an autonomy of strategy and so on. And the German defense minister just confirmed it. But, if I come to my own president, well, I think the guy may be bright sometimes, but on the other side, he's completely incoherent himself. Because on one side, if you are in favor of a European strategic autonomy, and you have an American president telling the world, well, I want to withdraw American troops from many countries, you NATO countries, you have to spend more for your own defense, then this is a huge opportunity. Instead of that, what was Macron's first big gesture against Trump? It was challenging Trump because of the Paris summit. Well, I mean, why not? But then, if you challenge Trump on one of his core beliefs, then you cannot expect the guy will support you when you need him to take some distance from Germany, because this is the challenge for the French. Either we are with Germany, or we need to take some autonomy, but we cannot do it alone. With whom can we do it? With the US, certainly. At least it was possible with Trump. And there is then the second incoherence in Macron's attitude, which was his very aggressive stance towards Britain during the whole Brexit negotiation. I mean, we have a lot of military cooperation with Britain. It's much more important than what we have with Germany. Why was Macron so aggressive if his goal was having a kind of strategic European strategic autonomy? So I think that it only tells us that France has a kind of double language. On one side, France pretends to be a heir of the Gaullist heritage, the continuator of General de Gaulle. On the other side, it doesn't develop any other strategy than just at the end aligning with let's say the European core around Germany, with this very cautious foreign policy, which will not lead to a European strategic autonomy. So what I would say finally is one of the last incoherences as far as the relation to Trump was concerned was towards China. I mean, you see on one side, with the COVID-19 crisis, suddenly everybody is against China. Well, I must say personally, I find the Chinese behavior during this crisis was really went against every international rule. But on the other side, I mean, how can you rejoice about the defeat or possible defeat of an American president who was the first one in the West to say, let's stop China, the Chinese attitude in international relations. So you see, I think that we lack in Europe a real coherence in our strategic views. And I will not criticize Germany, because we know exactly how the Germans are thinking on this topic. I will criticize my own government because they are not what they pretend to be. They are not the successors of General de Gaulle, and well, in French we would say in some familiar way, they don't know where they are living. They don't know where they are at home. So they are neither fully on the cautious German and, let's say, a more general European attitude, nor on a really independent stance. And well, I mean, France would have to invest much more for its defense. This is not a question. So this is why I'm very critical of Macron's attitude.
Okay, thank you, Edouard.
Absolutely agree.
You're the only one, because this Pietro, this heterogeneous
I didn't want to kill the debate. Perhaps you are disappointed, but you know, I cannot say that I support my president when I don't see what the tools for the implementation of the strategy are. Where are the tools? I don't see them. We have a heritage coming from de Gaulle with nuclear power, with some capacity of influence on the international scene, but I see no innovation. It's just using the past and telling the others we disagree. So what?
No, yes, okay. Marie-Hélène.
Yeah, just briefly, I'm beginning to wonder if Europe is not becoming a trap also, you know, somehow. That's the problem we are beginning to have. Is France not going to realize at some point that if you're in Europe, you can't deal with these things, in fact. You have to comply with everyone else. And isn't it why the UK ended up leaving? So, you know, we should be careful about this. Unless indeed there is a way, as Adrian put it, the way which is to say, okay, let's go for NATO, but let's go for a new NATO. But I wanted to ask you, Adrian, if you think that it's really underway, or if it's just your idea, which of course I share, and is it really feasible to see a NATO that gains some kind of legitimacy to become some kind of more global security system? So I really wonder if we are really going in that direction, and if we are not, this vision of a Europe that starts working on NATO, on this bilateral transatlantic NATO as it is today. It's not as it is today, because as I was saying, Adrian, I do believe that the Europeans are trying to play a card in which they are going to rebalance NATO, at least. Is this rebalancing in favor of integrating a stronger Europe? Will it be will it create the possibility to indeed open completely the dynamic and move to other places in the world? And this value thing is always, I find, very complicated, because, you know, what we think our values are not anymore very much welcomed by the rest of the world. So I'm not so sure that talking about democracy when we don't have a European democracy, and when we see how the American democracy works, I'm not sure we are very good sellers of these kind of values too. And so I wonder how we can sell a NATO saying, yes, you can enjoy our security under our leadership if you are nice and good and do democracy like we do. I'm not, that's where I both completely agree to what you say, but I don't see it taking place. And I see France more and more maybe getting a feeling, and I worry for that. I mean, we have a 30-year, like you, of history of pro-European, of activism. And I'm beginning, as a French citizen, beginning to think that, is Europe a trap? Has it become a trap?
You've got about 20 questions in there, Marie-Hélène, and it's going to be impossible to answer everything. Let me just try and take a couple of the questions and go in that. Number one, are we moving currently in that direction? No. But the debate did come up about 8 years ago, at the time when it was Obama. Yeah. And I suspect Biden is going to pick that debate up, because the new American administration is looking for something different, that it's going to sell its own people. We're not just going back to how it used to be. So they're going to be looking for something. So that's point number one. Actually, picking up on something Edouard said as well, there's another dimension. Edouard said, Germany obviously is rather scared of this European strategic autonomy. As soon as they could, they said, we're back to NATO, we want to be. Yeah, true. Why? Because in Germany, the fear we have is that Europe is being perceived as Germany writ large. Let me repeat that. Just Germany is worried that everybody else says Europe actually means Germany. And so if you say Europe is global, then actually you're saying Germany throwing its weight around. And let's be honest, when you look at the headlines in Greece about what Germany makes the EU do to Greece or other places, I'm thinking back in the financial crisis here, yeah, then you can appreciate why we think that way. And especially, and add on, that's to Edouard's point again, with Brexit. Now you've lost the other big defense player and the other substantial large player on that side. The fact they've left now means it's even more France and Germany and Italy, but on the money side, Germany, and then for the military side, the other three. Then it's even more that fear that is generated. So the Germans are going to have to come up with something as well. They can't just sit there and say, okay, we don't care. So it's not going to be the integrated EU complete pole, and then there's a US complete pole in NATO. In any case, there's Britain and Turkey, and Turkey, second largest military in NATO. Yeah, not part of EU. It's not just, there are now two other major powers out there, forget the Norwegians or whatever else. They're important, they're good. It seems that it's really, there are a lot of other players out there. So you're not going to have that. So that road is blocked. That road is blocked. Where else can we go? That becomes a little bit my answer to the question. You have to then open up the question of where we can go. And maybe I can pick up on another point that Edouard made about why is Macron so aggressive to the UK in terms of Brexit? Well, frankly, because the UK deserves it. Let's be quite honest. They've done a really stupid thing, but that's their way. That's fine. But I think more importantly, it is because the UK is now outside the EU. Effectively, he has to be forced to make the choice: is it Europe geography? Or is it European Union? And if it's European Union, then I'm afraid all that defense cooperation with the UK is going to have to play second rank. It's going to have to be put back. And you're going to have to increase the cooperation with Germany and others. And so there's an element of sort of DP, he's just angry, but there's an element of strategic logic. If I'm going to say you're no longer European Union and European Union is going to be focused on my defense, then you know what? I'm sorry, that defense cooperation with the UK is also going to go the same way. That is a fore message of what might be coming. That would be the implication if I was reading Macron that way. Last thing, and I think that's the heart of this. You were talking about values, Marie-Hélène, and about the problems of democracy, both here and also in the US. I think that is the core of the problem with European defense. If we were to have a European army, and we had that project, remember, the European defense project was back in the 50s, yeah? And then there was a European political project that was to be parallel. You have to have somebody who is able to send those soldiers into battle, and if something goes wrong, who will be democratically accountable for the deaths that happen as a result. And at the moment, we do not have that. And as long as we do not have that, we are not going to get beyond the stage of having little national militaries. Now, I can make an analogy with the Americans later, but maybe I'll leave that for now, because otherwise I'm going to speak for too long for now. Let me just leave it at that for the moment.
I fully agree with your last point, Adrian. I think that's the who in a non-democratic EU would want a European defense. It's dangerous. Okay, so
Mariana, you want to say something?
For me?
You want to say something?
Yes. I just wanted, because I had coming back on this debate, on this discourse from the national and from the European level. I think there are two different levels, and the defense, it's not only on European. It's not only a discussion, a debate on European level, but also back on the national ones, because you have the problems of security, you have the problem of terrorism, you have the problem of cyber security, And I think it's very important because we have also a swift change of paradigm. It's not no more the defense as we know it to defend our borders with tanks and with armies, but really we are also going into cyber wars, and with drones, etc. And I think perhaps coming back on what Edouard said about Edouard Macron, I have really the feeling that he's divided in two between a discourse he has to have for his French citizens and French politicians, because I think we have this in France. There is a double level with the old conservatives, anti-Turkey, pro-Armenian, and who don't understand the new challenges Europe is facing or the world is facing, and a new discourse that should be adapted to the European level, and this is the same with Brexit. I think we are still stuck in something from the last century and unable to come out from that and to switch on new paradigms and see that we have to go to think about those things differently, very differently, and this is something what was appealing to me. And there is really an anachronism between these two different worlds.
Okay, Edouard.
Last point made by Marianne. Well, you know, I think that when you speak of the French society, you have to take into account the fact that you have at least 1/3 of the French society. They don't care. I mean, they're fighting with economic crisis, with the taxes, with the COVID crisis. They are going bankrupt because of it. So, I mean, they don't care at all about what Macron is saying. And when they care about it, their view, and I think it's not totally inaccurate, is that he's just part of a big global game, which is not the French interest. So these people, they tend to think, and they would vote as the Brexiters did in Britain. They are French Trumpists, you know. So I think this is at least 1/3. This is really a very strong feeling. So I mean, Macron, I would rather interpret Macron's attitude as a kind of looking for a balance between, let's say, the old Gaullist way of thinking as a French ruler, is that you have to assert your country as independent. On the other side, well, he wants, you know, his dream is to be part of the global game. He wants to belong to the global elites, and he wants to be a major figure there. So Macron is never happier than when he's celebrated by Time magazine or by The Economist, and he was rather unhappy recently when he was criticized by American newspapers. So I think you have to see that he doesn't care about the third of the society I was mentioning. He only cares about the upper part of the society which elected him. And he wants to be reelected. So, and then he knows that in the center right, people who voted Fillon, the conservative candidate in 2017, they would rather select him in 2022 if he makes no mistake. So that's the only reason for his game, and I don't think that he really cares about different streams inside the broader French society, I would say. but it's my opinion.
Yeah, but just because I was taking France and Macron as example, but I think that we have the same problem with Germany also. And in Germany also, we have this different this confrontation between a more traditional vision of the NATO and a more and the modern one, and the future of this organization. I think it's not only in France. I think it could be also in all the different European countries.
Okay, we can ask to Pietro that I see that he's come back. So Pietro, if you are
yes, I'm back.
Okay, if you want to say,
I had a technical issue. I disappeared. It took me a time to get back. So this means I missed some of your talkings. I catched very well first speech from Adrian and the second Edouard. I totally agree with both of them. I liked very much when Edouard explained that this Trump period was an excellent moment to take advantage of to create, let's say, some autonomy in general, and especially in the defense. But what I think is that then I missed what was following. So, ladies, I didn't hear you. But what I wanted to comment is that I think that this is because Europe has been built from the roof. It has been built from the unified currency, and that was something that was to be done at the end of the construction, because first of all, if we talk about defense, we have to have borders, and here the borders are not something that are European. Every country thinks that its border has its border, not European borders, and we have seen this very, very clearly in all these recent years. Not only because of the immigration, but even now, for example, nobody really thinks about defending Greece from the Turks, and nothing about that. The Greeks have to go to the US if they want some help and so. So I think the whole construction of Europe has been done wrongly. The picture was nice at the beginning, and the construction was totally opposite of what it should have been done. And also, and within this, the NATO was a tool of the policy of the US, especially in the last decades, and it was used for US objectives around the world, and we stick to it, to this idea. We did this, so we didn't build anything at all in terms of Europe, because if you want to build even a federal country, you have to talk about culture. Well, maybe culture is the only thing we have something strong in common, but we have to think about the borders. We have to have a parliament which is elected from the people, and that elects who governs who governs the territory. There's no territory. There's nothing. There's only a unified currency, which has caused immense problems to a lot of states to help just a couple of them. Let's say Germany and Holland, and the rest were the other countries were suffering from the unified currency. And very correct, the British didn't want to join this because they understood that it was absolutely wrong. So I think that the entire design of Europe should be rebuilt from scratch. And this takes an enormous amount of years. So I think today to think about a unified defense when everything behind this is not done is something that is not credible, is not feasible. Should be something nice, but I don't think that we can. We cannot. The two major countries in Europe are France and Germany, and I have participated in exercises, NATO exercising very many years ago, and it was clear that the American generals were leading it, and everybody stayed behind this. And if you have to have a defense, you have to have a commander-in-chief. You have to have somebody that is not discussed. And I don't see that the French generals stay behind German, nor German generals stay behind French general. So even if the Italians could be behind, maybe no problem. But between French and German, there's no way to operate together for a single task, a single objective in terms of defense, I think.
Okay, thank you, Pietro. Someone who wants to react to what he said, Pietro? Okay, Adrian?
Yeah, I think I'll pick up on a couple of Pietro's points. And interestingly, I think there are two different things that have to be said here. Number one, there is the political, and number two, there is the military. And of course, the EU has its own military command. It has these people sitting in Brussels. You have the orders going from up down. You have the European battle group, the battle group which is able, so say, to deploy, etc., etc. So you have the figurative elements of a small but still soldierly ability. So there, Pietro, I mean, there are already officers, within Europe who are ordering each other around. But I think the point you're making is a more fundamental one. It's the politics underneath it. Are you prepared to die for, name another country's territory? Imagine that, I don't know, Nouvelle-Calédonie in the southern hemisphere was invaded by a neighbor. Would European troops really want to go there to protect Nouvelle-Calédonie? I'm taking a very wild example, but deliberately, because it's exactly, I think, what you're trying to get at, Pietro, yeah? So let's separate, shall we say, the military structures from the political legitimacy dimension. There's a good news and a bad news here. We are currently in Europe, I would say, where the United States of America was approximately between 1800 and 1810. What do I mean by that? In 1810, or the US, or 1812, just before the war broke out, the war I'll come to, the US had 12 ships as a federal navy, and it had 7,000 men as a federal army. The entirety of the rest of the army was in the hands of the member states, i.e. the federal states, in the form of militia. They made the bad mistake to go to war with Britain, to declare war on Britain, to attack and occupy Canada. The consequence of this was that two of the three prongs of the army, which was due to invade Canada, didn't, because the federated states, New Hampshire and all those people in New England, they said, we don't want to invade Canada. We do trade with them. We like them. Sod you. So one army invaded, got smashed, and then the Brits unfortunately finished the war in Europe and sent loads of troops across and burnt the White House down. Now, what am I getting at? Why am I mentioning this? It's because in Europe, we are in a similar political situation. Remember at that time, in the US at that time, there was no elected president. The president was elected by the Electoral College. The Electoral College was elected by the states. And how did the states decide to elect it at that time? By their parliaments. It was actually the state legislatures that nominated the people going to the Electoral College. It was not voters. The Senate was only elected from 1913 onwards. Until then, it was the representatives of the state sitting in the federal capital. That's what we have right now with the Council of Ministers. The only directly elected chamber was the House of Representatives, which is what the European Parliament is. So politically, we are in a very similar condition. At the time, Hamilton had introduced a currency for the first time. It got thrown out. to your point, Pietro, they didn't like the single currency either. That's why you end up with these wildcat banks and only get a federal currency as of the Civil War, 1865 or 1861, actually. I mean, but anyway. So my point is, we are at a similar point in history where the US was then. But the question is, do we want to go the way of the Americans and try and drive that to becoming a European Union like the Americans? Or do we have a other vision? Do we just want to become another superpower? And that was what I was making the point. What do we want this for? Is it just to say we are going to be super strong out there? Or do we have a different vision that somehow we can lead the world to peace by doing something differently? And that's where I'm trying to go with my values community, Marie-Hélène. I agree, it's not easy, but it's a different path to the one of, you know what, we're now going to become the super people of the planet, and we're going to also have a super army, and we're going to be able to project power, and. So I think that's where I'm seeing us right now, where we are today. And you're quite right about the risk, though, Pietro, is that somebody does attack Greece. Let's not mention a country. And as a result, the European single currency goes bombing down and everybody else suffers because one country is being attacked. And then we have to sit there and say, do we just let them die or do we intervene? Now, I hope we don't get to that situation, but that's a little bit what the War of 1812 did to the US. It catalyzed that change. And maybe we will have a shock from at some point from the outside that will force us to do the same. Enough from me for the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, very well. Exactly. The point is that how long did the US take to get to what they are now? Let's say what they were in the World War at many years. We don't have that time, and we say we. It's the Europeans. Who is we? We do not really think we are. I mean, the people here in the meeting. We of course we feel Europeans, but there is not this sentiment in the political structures, everyone think at its own, and nobody will, as you said, go and die for someone in Caledonia, in Ireland, or whatever. So it could take a long time. So we had an opportunity, 4 years. We didn't even get that opportunity to make a step ahead, and thinking that maybe we need some more 50 years. It's really, I'm not optimistic.
I'm sorry, but I don't really agree with that, because we have soldiers from Germany, from France, from Spain, from Portugal going into war in Africa or in the Middle East. So we have still people who are fighting in other countries. So I think the European citizens are also concerned by that, and it's very important. I think it's a very important point that they feel concerned by that, and there they are feeling that they are belonging to something which is up to their own nation. Of course, it's a French army in Mali, it's a French army in Syria or in Iraq or so on, but not only the French ones. You have also other Europeans who are there, and this is very important. Also, this is something I don't know. So I have not the feeling that the Europeans are against European defense. I'm not sure for that. We have just to be clear that European defense can no more.
In each scenario, you have one army doing one thing.
I didn't catch it.
Sorry. We are not, go.
No, it's okay.
Pietro, finisci di dire. Tu fini di dire?
No, I just wanted to say that in the example that Marianne made, which are correct, of course, but we have a very small piece of professional soldiers from one country doing one thing for their own country. Generally, I don't know, the Italians are in Afghanistan doing what? Doing exactly this. And the French are in Mali doing what? That. And this is not linked to the others. It's not one army. It's not. Adrian.
Attends, Edouard before, and then I will.
Yes, very shortly. Well, if you take the comparison further, there's one thing we will never have in the European Union is the shared language. But let's say that we could replace it with having a shared strategic thinking and shared values, and we don't have them at all, because I think that countries, what we have been focusing on France and Germany, and speaking a little about Italy because we have Italians with us, but let's say what is the vision of the Netherlands? We never mentioned in our debate the fact that Poland, for instance, is very pro-American, but they will have a problem with Biden because he doesn't like the current government. And well, I think there's another very, very important aspect we never mentioned. It's Russia. I mean, the Italians would like some kind of reconciliations with Russia. Germany doesn't want to implement it. So I think you know the main the first obstacle is that we have no shared vision, and I think this is really terrible for the European Union. So I wouldn't, and just to add something to what Marianne said, I mean, well, yes, French have some interest in Mali, and it's important that our soldiers are there, but you will never bring German soldiers there. So what are the shared interests? The shared interests.
But you have German soldiers there.
Not so many, but perhaps you are right. But it's not with.
We are there.
Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps I'm wrong. Let's say you will not bring many different countries there. But the important thing is that what are the shared challenges? I mean, you mentioned cybersecurity. Well, you know, we are totally unable to have a real efficient vision about that, and that's not what was published a few days ago. What will make the difference? We have been saying for a few months, well, the Chinese, we should refuse 5G and so on if it comes from China. But I mean, the Chinese challenge goes much deeper than that. It's how can you really criticize China when on the other side you didn't care a lot about Greece or Italy having to rely on Chinese investments because as Germany you were not supporting money transfer to financial transfers to these countries. So I think we have to face the reality. There is no coherence, and I would like to mention a last point which really struck me. I mean, Angela Merkel is almost at the end of her many years in power, and she had a tremendous opportunity with the presidency of the European Union. What did she really do out of it? I see no big heritage, no big I think, well, you will say the financial aspect and the funding plan to fight the COVID, but I mean that's going a little further. That's just opening the potential of the euro and just opening the possible indebtedness of shared indebtedness of European countries. But you have so many points where
Edouard is blocked. So Edouard. In any case, we see a heterogeneous situation, as I told in the beginning. Adrian, do you want to continue? We are waiting for Edouard.
Maybe just while waiting for Edouard, hopefully who can come back again, let me just raise 3 points. Let me pick up on something Marianne said quite a long time ago, which I think has disappeared, and we need to put it back on the table, which is the nature of defense is changing fundamentally. You just saw what the Azerbaijani army might manage to do, for instance, to the Armenian army using floats of Turkish drones. You look at the cyber warfare dimension. You look at CRISPR technology, which could be used for biotech or for some kind of nasty attack. Now, you're increasingly able to see defense as not just being tanks and bombs coming across the border. It is increasingly the ability for doing as asymmetrical of doing other types of warfare that will be whole of society. Now, that is something where I can see the European Union as European Union doing more, and it is already doing it. Yeah, it's already trying to get there. So rather than trying to go into the tanks and bomb sphere, that the European Union, at least on the level of those other security defense issues, can be the major forum. I can see that as happening. Secondly, there is an open question, and it was mentioned a couple of times. We haven't really talked about defense capabilities. I realize in an hour it's impossible to talk about everything, okay? But there are clear gaps in European defense capabilities. And one option is indeed that we make the European Union become the provider of those things that are in the gaps. So in other words, you need to increase the European budget again, but to pay for instance, a European airlift fleet, or to pay for that missing satellite thing. We've already got a satellite center in Seville. You could merge a lot of other things. Okay, now I'm not going to make many more points. You could, if you wanted to. Now, the risk of that, however, and that's what I come back to Pietro's point. The risk is we are building many more elements without having the political legitimacy behind it. And at some point, if we don't have that political legitimacy behind us, the whole house of cards will collapse. And it will be precisely because of what Edouard is saying. The lack of strategic alignment is because there is no one really able to give it. Yes, we have a European security strategy. Yes, it's written on paper, and everybody nodded their heads and said, yes. But as you say, Edouard, that's not the point we're making. The point we're making is it has to be driven behind by something that has a consequence that goes through society. So when you are thinking about Greece, you don't say privatize Piraeus and sell it to the Chinese at the cheapest price. And then the Chinese say to Greece, well, make sure you block anything in the European Union. Otherwise, we pull out of Piraeus. You know, it's that kind of short-term thinking we have to somehow block and get out of. So I agree with Pietro, but I disagree with Pietro. I think there's a lot of things happening on the ground practically. And the last thing I'd say, remember in Italy, you had, what's his name? Marquis d'Azaglio or something like that. You know, he said, we have made Italy, now we need to make the Italians. The question is, do we need to make Europeans, or do we actually say, no, we're not about making a big federal member nation state. We want to go in a different direction, which is what I've kind of been pleading for. Well, enough from me anyway. Now, I think Edouard's back anyway, so he can carry on.
We have not much more time because Edouard have to go.
I will have to very, very shortly. I'm sorry, but anyway, I just was at the end of my argument, and I hope you had the end. I just wanted to say that I was somewhat struck by the fact that that Angela Merkel, even if she was in power for so many years and met with four different French presidents, she will have less legacy in Europe than, let's say, Sarkozy when he fought against the financial crisis during his term, or even Macron in his way with his vision. You know, that's a paradox.
Yes, so I think that we can so much time, but what can I say with you that is again another common vision that still lack in Europe. We saw this in other transmission that we did with Marianne and Marie-Hélène for other domain, as for the education, as last time we talked about health. So I propose you, if you want, maybe next year, that is not so far, to retalk again, because I think that here we still lack. How can we do to have this common vision and not so long in time? If you have your idea, we can meet together for another episode. If you have your solution to propose, Edouard, Adrian, Pietro, Marianne, Marie-Hélène, I think that it's important, because I have seen that we have several visions for this video, and I think that it could be interesting next time to propose solution if you want. Okay, so I thank you all very much. Good Christmas for everybody, even if the situation is what it is. So I think we finish this series of new European perspectives in this year that we begin. That it was a strange year, but we had allowed us to put in place this broadcasting. I think very, very interesting about European issues. So I give an appointment next year, very, very soon. So let's propose a solution, my dears, that I think Europe needs a lot to go fast and go forward, and very, very at a long time also.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Maria, for the...
Thank you, Maria, for the... Yes. And have a nice Christmas time, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
And Adrian, you have the wave.
Bye, Pietro.
Thank you.
The wave.
It's a wave. It's a tsunami. It's the tsunami that's coming to cover us if we don't do something soon. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.
There you go.
Ciao.